Welcome back. The situation in the South China Sea has become more precarious and some say more unpredictable even after the historic ruling of the Permanent Court of Arbitration, the maritime dispute in the region. China's 9-dash line has been invalidated, but China's remained firm it would not recognize the ruling. It has even adopted a belligerent stand, but the administration of President Duterte is hopeful that bilateral negotiations could still pave the way for a solution to the current stalemate. Today, we are fortunate to have on the studio our guest for today, Dr. Lowell Bautista, lecturer at the School of Law of the University of Wollongong in Australia, to help us better understand the issue. He was also one of the speakers in the recently concluded two-day second Manila Conference on the South China Sea of the Foreign Service Institute, Griffith University Asia Foundation, and New Era University. Good afternoon, Dr. Bautista.
Good afternoon.
Welcome to the program.
Pleasure.
Okay, sir. Sir, as we've mentioned, the situation in the South China Sea have become more and more precarious even after the ruling. So your thoughts on that, sir?
After the ruling, it's obvious that there will be a short period of uncertainty. There's really heightened tension, and that should be expected. We have a belligerent, more hostile China, quite obviously upset with the ruling. But if we look at it from a long-term perspective, it will be obvious that the relationship is more robust, more resilient. So we should expect something more optimistic, but that would come in due course, but not in the immediate.
Sir, do you think it's important to have, as what Ms. Quintos was saying in the video shown a while ago, to resort to the provisional arrangements of the UNCLOS, sir?
My personal opinion, of course, the UN Convention on the Law of the Sea provides for that. But I think at the moment, what is best done is to really take time to, as the Secretary said, to exercise restraint, sobriety, make realistic assessments of where we are, recalibrate our positions, and in doing so, I think to allow China to have its time to also find its own bearings, and in the meantime, for negotiations not to proceed until such time as it will be favorable for both parties to do so.
Sir, where do you think the problem is coming from? Like, I was in the conference, attended the two-day conference yesterday and the other day, and there are talks about China saving face. This is the first time they are suffering from a legal defeat, a major legal defeat after so long. So your thoughts on that, sir?
Thanks, Nefra. That's a very good question, because I think on China's part, as I said, they're feeling quite betrayed. They feel that the Western imposed international law did not take their side, and in fact they're behaving in such a hostile manner because they feel that they're a world superpower at the cost of primacy, and we have all these nations imposing upon them a ruling which they think is not does not apply to them, because they have historic rights that they feel rightfully have been established through centuries of dealings in the region.
What about domestic pressure? Do you think it also adds to this reaction of China?
Definitely, because China is also dealing with questions of legitimacy on the domestic front. The same thing we see on the Philippine side. That's why it's best really to take a back step and really allow time for the parties to really assess and find their bearings.
Sir, going back to the arbitration ruling, can you give us some of the important points of this ruling?
If you ask me, it's a 500-page ruling. There's so many points discussed by the tribunal. But if you can allow me, at least in my view, my personal opinion, there are three important points which should be taken really good consideration. The first one is very clear. The court unanimously, unequivocally declared the 9-dash line to be not valid in international law. It does not find basis in international. It's incompatible with the convention. So we should not oblige China if they still claim indisputable sovereignty based on those claims. Secondly, the court said that there are features which are rocks and islands. So I wouldn't want to enumerate all those features, but they have far-reaching consequences, because if they are rocks, they can only generate territorial sea. If they're islands under Article 1213, they can have more extended maritime zones, EEZ and continental shelf. And finally, the court also said there are traditional fishing rights in Scarborough Shoal, which means we should not be prohibited. At the moment, I've been seeing the news, and our fishermen are still not back in that area. So China should allow our fishermen to fish in that area the same way that we cannot prohibit them. They should not also prohibit the fishermen from this country, as well as China, Vietnam, and Taiwan, to fish in that area. But
unfortunately, sir, as you have mentioned, they are prohibiting our fishermen. So what could be our next legal step on that, sir, if there's any?
So I think these are the pockets of areas in the award where there could be practical measures done by the government. Among those would be trying to secure access rights, trying to secure the safety of our fishermen, and making sure that their livelihood and their source of income are protected.
Sir, on the other point of the court ruling, sir, you've mentioned that the 9-dash line was invalidated. How will this affect the other claimants, sir? Generally, it only binds the parties,
exactly.
right, sir? But I remember one of the speakers from Indonesia, it says that they are somehow the ruling also binds them.
So you're correct. Technically, under international law, the ruling only binds the parties, which means the Philippines and China. That's strictly interpreted. But if you look at the terrain of international, of course, this would have far-reaching presidential weight. So we have a five-man unanimous tribunal who decided a point of law. They will not strictly bind the other claimant states, but of course, it would be very unlikely that another tribunal in the future would actually go against this ruling, which means the conclusion would also be binding as an interpretation of the convention. And the other parties, I'm sure, they're watching as well, and they could be benefiting from this victory by the Philippines.
So yesterday I was talking to Sir Chito Santa Romana,
yes.
China analyst. He was also in the conference yesterday, and he was telling me that another reason why he thinks China is doing this is because if they would accept this ruling, there are probably more suits coming from the other claimant states. What do you think of that, sir?
Well, that's possible, but if you have nothing to fear, they would have used the platform to at least clarify their claims, or if they genuinely feel that they have a solid basis for their claim, they would have used the platform to validate their claim. So if it stands on shaky ground, then they have much to fear. But if it's something that they're sure that they really have a valid claim, then there's nothing to fear. They have the option to get out of the convention. Article 317 allows them to do that. But in the meantime, it would only take effect after a year, and all rights obligations that have persisted before that could still be filed against China, unfortunately.
Okay, sorry, I have to go back to the 9-dash line. If it's invalidated, then I don't know, correct me if I'm wrong. All the other states, all the other areas in the South China Sea, which is covered by the 9-dash line, what will happen to the claim of China in those areas?
So if it's not valid in the international, that means those waters are actually waters pertaining to the coastal state who has jurisdiction. In this case, it's quite clear if it's within our EEZ, they're actually rightfully ours. And in international, you can only have your zones from the islands. So if they don't have any landforms which are rightfully theirs, then the waters are within our EEZ, and therefore exclusively for the Philippines alone.
Okay, sir. ASEAN as of now has not yet issued any unified position on the matter. How will this affect our position in the South China Sea?
It doesn't affect the validity of our claim or our stand, but I think it's very contentious. It's actually showing fish fractures in ASEAN. It challenges the notion of ASEAN centrality, which I think is not a good thing. But on the other hand, I think it's also it's a good opportunity for the states to really rally behind the rule of law, international law, rather than to bow to the diplomacy of our big neighbor in the region.
Sir, there's another point I was thinking about the comments of Ambassador Rosario Manalo, and she was saying that we should also take into consideration the sociological and the anthropological component of the South China Sea issue. And yesterday she was, I think it's the other day, she was talking about the sphere of influence of China. How do you think that sphere of influence will affect this South China Sea issue?
Well, if you look at China's rise, it is undeniable. It will be the global superpower in due course. But I think Ambassador Manalo's point is also about being culturally, anthropologically sensitive to the Asian values, which means it's not the time for us to gloat about our victory, but rather be magnanimous, be graceful, and not humiliate China any further, because it will not do us any good to do that. And in fact, we should really work towards a restoration of our relationship. As I said, it's really the task of the lawyers are done mostly. It's now the realm of diplomats, and we should let the professionals do their job. And in the meantime, not incite our people to do any inflammatory actions against China. And of course, China should also exercise restraint on their part.
Okay, so one last question. What should the Philippines, or what is the best option for the Philippines to move forward after the ruling of the Permanent Court of Arbitration?
the best option is always to do bilateral negotiations or even multilateral if that avenue provides itself. But in the meantime, as I said, we should allow the parties to heal, to find their bearings anew, to recalibrate their positions, to just allow a period of sobrieties. And also the other important point that we should not lose is to use this ruling, not to ignore it. When we go to the when we go to the negotiating table at the right time, it should be part of the negotiating cards put on the table.
All right. Thank you so much, sir, for gracing
Thank you so much.
Yeah. Sir. And that is the latest news in the Southeast Asian nations. Stay updated about the ASEAN region. I'm Nea Mangawang, and I am one with 25.